Chapter 1. Tequila Watson. The shots that fired the bullets that entered Pumpkin's head were heard by 8 people. 3 immediately closed their windows, locked their doors, and withdrew to the safety of their small apartments. 2 others, with previous experience of incidents like this, ran away faster than the gunman himself. Another, who was digging through some garbage for cans, jumped behind a pile of boxes until the shooting stopped. 2 saw almost everything. They were sitting at the corner of Georgia Street and Lamont Street in front of a grocery store, half hidden by a parked car so that the gunman, who glanced around briefly before following Pumpkin into the alley, didn't see them. Both told the police that they saw the boy with the gun reach into his pocket and pull it out. A second later, they heard the shots, though they didn't actually see Pumpkin get hit. But they did see the boy with the gun rush out of the alley and run straight in their direction. He ran bent at the waist with a scared and guilty look on his face. When he passed them, he was still holding the gun which, for one terrifying second, he seemed to point at them. Keeping their heads down, both of them crawled as quickly as they could into the grocery store and shouted for someone to call the police. There had been a shooting. 30 minutes later, the police received a call that a young man matching the description of Pumpkin's killer had been seen carrying a gun in open view on 9th Street and acting very strangely. The police found their man an hour later. His name was Tequila Watson, a black male aged 20 with the usual drug-related police record. No family, no address. The last place he had been sleeping was a rehab unit on W Street. He had thrown away the gun and had also thrown away the cash or drugs he must have stolen from Pumpkin because his pockets were empty. The police were certain that Tequila hadn't been affected by drink or drugs when he shot Pumpkin. After a few quick, rough questions, he was handcuffed, pushed into the back seat of the police car, and taken back to the alley near Lamont Street where he had killed Pumpkin. "Ever been here before?" one policeman asked. Tequila said nothing, just stared at the pool of fresh blood on the dirty ground. After the 2 witnesses from outside the grocery store had identified him, Tequila was pushed into the car once again and taken to jail. He was charged with murder and sat quietly in a crowded cell, saying nothing to anyone, just staring at the floor. Pumpkin's mother, Adelpha Pumphrey, was sitting behind a desk just inside the basement entrance of a large office building on New York Avenue, watching the security screens. She was a large woman in a tight brown uniform, a gun on her waist, an empty look on her face. The policeman who approached her had visited her many times before. They gave her the news, then found her boss. In a city where young people killed each other every day, every mother knew many others who had lost their children, and every mother knew that she could lose hers at any time. The mothers had watched the other mothers survive with horror. As Adelpha Pumphrey sat at her desk, with her face in her hands, she thought of her son and his lifeless body being inspected by strangers somewhere in the city at that moment. She cried for her baby and swore revenge on whoever had killed him. Adelpha went to court to watch her son's killer being formally charged. The police told her that it would be a quick, routine matter. The killer would plead not guilty and ask for a lawyer. She was in the back row, with her brother on one side and a neighbor on the other, crying into a damp handkerchief. She wanted to see the boy. She also wanted to ask him why, but she knew she would never get the chance. They brought the criminals into the courtroom like cattle at a market. All were black, all wore orange prison suits and handcuffs, and all of them were young. In addition to his handcuffs, Tequila had chains on his wrists and ankles because his crime had been especially violent, though he looked fairly harmless now. Adelpha stared at the thin boy in the orange prison suit and wondered where his mother was, how she had raised him, if he had a father, and, most important, why he had killed her son. The police had told her that drugs weren't involved in the killing, but she knew better. Drugs were involved in every layer of street life. "Tequila Watson," a court official announced at last. The prisoner was helped to his feet by another official and moved slowly forward. "Mr. Watson, you are charged with murder," the judge said loudly. "How old are you?" 20, Tequila said, looking down. After the reading of the charge, the courtroom had gone quiet. The other criminals looked at Tequila with admiration. The lawyers and policemen were curious. "Can you afford a lawyer?" "No. I didn't think you could," the judge said quietly to himself, and looked at the defense table where usually many PDs, the badly paid lawyers from the Office of the Public Defender, were waiting to defend the poor. At that moment, however, there was only one: Clay Carter. He had come into the courtroom to pick up a few papers and realized, with horror, that the judge was looking at him. "Mr. Carter?" the judge said. Clay swallowed hard. A week earlier, he had finished a murder case which had lasted for almost 3 years, and he didn't want to defend another one. But he was the only PD in the room, and he couldn't show weakness and refuse to accept a case, especially with policemen and prosecuting lawyers watching. He walked calmly to the bench, took the file from the judge, quickly looked through it, and said, "We'll plead not guilty, Your Honor." "Thank you, Mr. Carter. And you'll be this man's lawyer?" "For now, yes." Clay was already planning to unload this case on someone else at the OPD. The judge thanked him again and began looking for the next file. Clay, meanwhile, sat next to Tequila Watson at the defense table and got as much information from him as the young man was willing to give, which was very little. Clay promised to visit the jail the next day for a longer interview. Then, grabbing his old, scratched briefcase, he hurried away. If Clay Carter had ever been attracted to a career in the OPD, he couldn't now remember why. He had been a PD for almost exactly 5 years, and at the age of 31, he felt tired and exhausted. He was trapped in an office that he was ashamed to show his friends, wanted to leave but didn't know how, and now had another senseless murder case to defend. In the elevator, he cursed himself for his bad luck and stupidity, and promised himself that he would leave and find a better job as soon as he could. The same promise that he had made to himself every day for the last 5 years. The OPD had 80 lawyers, all working in 2 small, airless floors of the District of Columbia Public Services Building on Mass Avenue. There were about 40 low-paid secretaries and 36 paralegals scattered around the jungle of tiny offices. The director was a woman named Glenda, who spent most of her time locked in her office because she felt safe in there. The beginning salary for an OPD lawyer was $36,000. Raises were small and infrequent. The workloads were enormous because the city was losing its war on crime. Like most of the other PDs, Clay Carter had never planned to work for the OPD. When he had been in college and then law school, his father had had a law firm in Washington, D.C. Clay had worked there part-time for years and had had his own office. The future had looked wonderful in those days, father and son litigating together as the money poured in. But the firm had gone bankrupt during Clay's last year at law school. His father had left town, and Clay had become a public defender. 5 years later, he still wondered what had gone wrong. He threw the Tequila Watson file onto the neat desk in his tiny, windowless office and wondered how he might unload it onto someone else. He was tired of the tough cases and all the other garbage that was thrown at him as an underpaid PD. He decided to call Rebecca, his longtime girlfriend, who reminded him that the following day was her mother's birthday. "My parents have invited us both to dinner at the club," she informed him. 7 o'clock. Coat and tie. A bad day just got worse. After the short phone call, he stared miserably at Rebecca's photo on his desk and thought he would rather have dinner with Tequila Watson at the jail. As he was thinking about his 4-year romance with Rebecca and how much he hated her rich, aggressive parents, his closest friend at the OPD, Paulette Toulouse, appeared in the doorway. "Bad luck," she said, smiling in the direction of the file on his desk. "Another murder case?" "What are my chances of getting rid of it?" he said. "Almost impossible. Who are you going to give it to?" "I was thinking of you." "Sorry. I have 2 murder cases already. I heard the prosecutors talking. Another street killing, but no apparent motive." "There's always a motive. Cash, sex, drugs, a new pair of Nikes." "But the kid has no history of violence." "First impressions are seldom true, Paulette. You know that." "Jermaine got a very similar case 2 days ago. Also no apparent motive." "I hadn't heard." "You might try him. He's new and ambitious, and who knows, you might be able to unload it on him." "I'll do it right now." Jermaine wasn't in, but Glenda's door, for some reason, was slightly open. Clay went in and asked Glenda if she could assign the Tequila Watson case to another PD. "Who do you want to give it to, Mr. Carter?" she asked him. "I don't really care. I just need a break." She leaned back in her chair and began chewing the end of her pen. "We'd all love a break, Mr. Carter, wouldn't we?" "Yes or no?" "Move it if you can, but I'm not going to reassign it." "Okay, but what about a higher salary?" "Next year, Mr. Carter. Next year." Clay returned to his office to look again at the Tequila Watson file. They called it the Criminal Justice Center, but it was really just a big jail. A guard led Clay down the hall to a long room divided by a thick sheet of unbreakable glass. He pointed to a chair, and Clay sat down and waited for Tequila Watson to appear on the other side of the glass. As he was looking through his papers, "Your boy had a bad night. He jumped on a kid at 2 o'clock this morning and almost beat him to death. It took 6 of our guys to pull him away. He's a mess." "Tequila?" Carter was surprised. "Watson, that's him. He put the other boy in the hospital. Expect additional charges." "Are you sure?" Clay asked. "It's all on video." They both looked up as Tequila was brought to his seat on the other side of the glass by 2 guards, each holding an elbow. He was handcuffed and, although prisoners usually had their handcuffs removed when they talked to their lawyers, Tequila's handcuffs weren't taken off. He sat down. The guards moved away but remained close. Tequila's left eye was swollen shut with dried blood in both corners. The right one was open, but it was bright red. There was a bandage around his head and some sticky tape on his chin. His lips and jaw were so swollen that Clay wondered at first whether he had the right client. He picked up the black phone receiver and motioned for Tequila to do the same. "The police tell me you started a fight with another kid last night and put him in the hospital. Is that true?" Tequila nodded. "Did you know the kid?" "No." "So why did you attack him?" "I don't know," Tequila answered, the words slow and painful. Further questions revealed that the other boy had been asleep when Tequila attacked him for no reason. Clay wrote a few things down in his notebook and looked up again. "They say you killed a boy, shot him 5 times in the head." The swollen head nodded slightly. "His name was Ramon Pumphrey, also known as Pumpkin. Did you know the guy?" "Yes, I used to buy drugs from him." "How long ago?" "A couple of years." "Did you shoot him?" Clay's voice was almost a whisper. The guards were asleep, but this wasn't a question that lawyers usually ask their clients, especially not at the jail. "I did," Tequila said softly. 5 times? "I thought it was 6. "Why did you do it? Was it a drug deal?" "No." "Girl trouble?"
"No."
Clay took a deep breath. "Do you fight a lot?"
"Not anymore. I had a fight once with Pumpkin when I was 12 years old."
"Did you see Pumpkin often?"
"Not much. Maybe twice a year."
"When you saw him 2 days ago, did you argue?" "Help me here, Tequila. I'm working too hard for details."
"We didn't argue."
"Why did you go into the alley?" Tequila put down the receiver and began moving his head backward and forward very slowly. He was obviously in some pain. When he picked up the receiver again, he said,
"I'll tell you the truth. I had a gun and I wanted to shoot somebody. Anybody, it didn't matter. I left the camp and just started walking, going nowhere looking for somebody to shoot. When I saw Pumpkin, I took him into an alley and shot him. I don't know why. I just wanted to kill somebody."
"What is the camp?" Clay asked.
"A rehab place. That's where I was staying."
"How long had you been there?"
115 days.
"No drugs or anything for 115 days?
"That's right."
"Not even when you shot Pumpkin?"
"Not then, not now."
"Did you ever shoot anybody before?"
"No."
"Where did you get the gun?"
"Stole it from my cousin's house."
"How did you get out of the camp?"
"After 100 days, they let you out for 2 hours.
"So, you walked out of the camp, went to your cousin's house, stole a gun, and shot Pumpkin for no reason."
"That's exactly what happened,"
Tequila nodded. Then, while Clay was pulling some papers out of his briefcase, he asked,
"What's going to happen to me?"
"We'll talk about it later."
"When can I get out?"
"It might be a long time."